The glass tower loomed in the fading twilight, its windows reflecting a fractured skyline and the shadows of a man whose empire was crumbling. Inside, the billionaire CEO sat alone, his wrists bound by cold metal handcuffs trembling. His gaze was fixed not on the world outside, but on a small child standing silently before him, innocence clashing with regret. On a nearby screen, his face dominated the cover of Time magazine, a symbol of power turned to downfall. A voice echoed softly in the room. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. No names were spoken. No context given. Just the raw paradox of triumph and tragedy, leaving the air thick with confusion and an emotional storm waiting to burst. Outside the towering fortress of glass, the city bustled unaware. The child's wide eyes searched the man's, trying to understand the storm that had brought them here. The CEO's sobs, once hidden behind polished speeches and headlines, now filled the silent room. The voice whispered again. He built an empire but lost the one thing that truly mattered. No explanations, no names, only the weight of consequences too heavy to carry alone. The paradox of power and loss stretched taut in the shadows, inviting questions with no answers. Inside, the CEO's sobs became a fragile confession, words caught between shame and longing. His empire's gleaming walls felt like a cage. The child, fragile yet steady, stepped closer, a silent offer of connection amid the ruins. The voice echoed once more. An empire built on ambition, yet fragile as the heart it failed to protect. In this suspended moment, the story whispered that behind every titan's fall, there was a personal tragedy waiting to be told. The city lights flickered beyond the window as the CEO's breathing slowed, his face marked by defeat and sorrow. No longer the untouchable titan, he was a man broken and exposed. The child's gaze held a silent question. Could this fallen giant find redemption? The voice murmured one last time. He was the CEO, but she was the boss of his heart. No fanfare. No resolution. Just the lingering ache of a story about to unfold. The final moments of the act freeze in time, a portrait of paradox and pain. The CEO's hands remained cuffed, yet the child's presence offered a fragile hope. The glass tower, symbol of power, now mirrored a man shattered. Outside, the city thrummed on, indifferent. And somewhere in the silence, a voice promised a story not just about business, but about heartache, redemption, and the cost of love. He was the CEO, but she was the boss of his heart. The story shifts focus, not to the fallen titan, but to the child who watched everything unravel. A young girl, no more than 8, stood in the shadows of a crowded playground, her eyes distant, absorbing the weight of failure she was born into. Her father's empire was a fortress she promised never to enter, not as he had. The distant laughter of other children clashed with the silence in her heart. "I won't be like him," she vowed silently, clutching a worn teddy bear. In her small hands, the future was fragile, but fiercely determined. This wound was hers, and from it, her strength would grow. Years later, the girl had grown into a woman, yet the sting of rejection still lingered. The boardroom was cold, polished, and unwelcoming, as she stood just outside its glass doors. Her application for a key role had been silently declined. Whispers of nepotism and doubt lingered in the hallways. She turned away, lips pressed tight, the sting of betrayal sharper than any business loss. "I'll build my own legacy," she promised, stepping into the uncertain shadows beyond the office's gleam. Power was no longer inherited. It would be seized through grit, and this time, on her terms. In a small, cluttered stall, a boy no older than 10 sat alone, his wide eyes fixed on a dusty shelf of toys. His mother pleaded quietly with the shopkeeper, her voice thick with desperation as she sought work, any work to keep them afloat. Poverty was a heavy cloak, suffocating and relentless, but the boy's gaze burned with quiet resolve. "One day I'll change this story," he thought, watching the busy street beyond the store's window. The roots of ambition were planted early, nourished by hardship and hope. Back in the city, late at night, the woman sat alone in a cramped apartment, her laptop glowing against the darkness. She scrolled through rejection emails, each one a sting to her pride and dreams. Her phone buzzed, friends inviting her out, but she declined, swallowed by work and worry. Sacrifice, she whispered, is the price for power. The weight of loneliness pressed down, but beneath it, a flicker of fire remained. The road ahead was long, and she was ready to walk it alone, armed with nothing but fierce resolve and dreams that refused to die. On a rainy afternoon, the boy from the store watched other children play from the sidewalk, clutching a small notebook filled with sketches and ideas. His mother's whispered prayers for a better future echoed in his mind. "I'll never let fear decide my path," he vowed silently, flipping the notebook open to plans for a business, something to lift them from hardship. In this moment, the boy's silent promise transformed into action. The seed of ambition was no longer a dream but a mission. This was the emotional anchor, where pain and hope forged the future. Sleepless nights became the norm as she poured herself into her startup. A flicker of hope kindled in the chaos. Her tiny apartment transformed into a war room filled with sketches, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. Every rejection fueled her determination. Every small win tasted bittersweet. Friends' texts went unanswered, birthdays passed quietly, and the line between sacrifice and obsession blurred. "This is just the beginning," she told herself, eyes bloodshot but fierce. The climb was steep, but the summit promised a new kind of power, one she would command on her own terms. Meanwhile, the boy's small venture began to take shape in the form of a neighborhood delivery service. His days were a whirlwind of bike rides, errand runs, and careful accounting scribbled in his notebook. Lost birthdays and abandoned playdates were the silent cost of ambition. Yet, each package delivered, each customer smiled, was a small victory. His mother watched from the sidelines, pride mingling with worry. "You're growing up fast," she whispered, knowing the road ahead would demand more than he could yet imagine. The woman's pitch to investors was met with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Faces blurred into a sea of doubt, but a few saw the fire beneath her words. "You're asking for more than just money," one said. "You want to rewrite the rules." She nodded, heart pounding. Wins were hard fought, but the taste of validation ignited a firestorm of ambition. Still, every success chipped away at her personal life. Friendships frayed, love interests faded, and loneliness grew. Yet she pressed on, knowing the price was steep, but the reward immeasurable. On the other side of town, the boy's small business encountered its first major hurdle, a broken bike and a lost delivery. Frustration welled up inside him, a rare crack in his otherwise steady resolve. "It's just the beginning," he muttered, repairing the tire with shaky hands. The cost of growth was beginning to weigh heavier. Lost trust, moments of doubt, the loneliness of leadership. But as night fell and city lights flickered on, his eyes gleamed with quiet determination. This was his moment to prove he could endure. Back in the corporate world, whispers of her rising influence began to circulate, an unyielding force reshaping the landscape. Yet with every step forward, the weight of lost connections pressed heavily. She stood on the precipice of something great, but the price was clear. She was growing, but something precious was slipping away. Late nights in boardrooms gave way to quiet dinners alone, a silent sacrifice made in the name of power. The journey had only just begun, and the cost was already rising. The ground beneath her shifted suddenly. Whispers turned to accusations. The business she had poured her soul into was never fully hers. A co-founder, once a trusted sibling, revealed as a shadow puppeteer pulling strings from behind the curtain. Betrayal cut deeper than any failure, shattering the fragile trust she had built. "It was never what I thought," she whispered, heart heavy. The empire's foundation was cracked, and with it her world trembled. The rules had changed, and the cost of ambition suddenly felt like a crushing weight. News spread like wildfire. The mentor she revered had stolen from her, siphoning resources under the guise of guidance. The sting of deception burned fiercely, collapsing years of loyalty in an instant. Alone in her office, she stared at empty accounts and broken promises. How could someone I trusted betray me? Her voice cracked with disbelief, the isolation tightening like a noose. The empire's glittering facade was nothing but dust and ashes. The floor had dropped beneath her feet, and the silence screamed the truth: nothing was safe. Meanwhile, the boy felt his own world tilt as whispers reached him. His health was fragile, a secret diagnosis threatening to unravel his dreams. He kept the truth locked inside, masking pain behind determination. "I'll fight this," he vowed silently, clutching a small medical bracelet hidden beneath his sleeve. The weight of illness was another barrier, one he refused to let define him. Yet beneath the surface fear gnawed quietly, threatening to undo everything he had worked for. The collapse was imminent, but he held onto hope with clenched fists. Back in the city's heart, the woman stood before her team, her voice steady despite the chaos beneath. The betrayal, the theft, the illness, they were battles fought silently. She couldn't share her vulnerabilities yet. Instead, she summoned every ounce of strength to keep the company afloat, even as cracks spread beneath her feet. The room listened, uncertain but hopeful. "We rise from the ashes," she declared, masking the pain. This was not surrender, but a fight to reclaim what was almost lost. The floor may have dropped, but she refused to fall. As night deepened, the boy lay awake, his thoughts a tangled web of fear and hope. The secret diagnosis loomed large, but so did the dream he guarded fiercely. He sketched plans under dim light, determination warring with exhaustion. The weight of illness, betrayal, and ambition collided inside him, creating a fragile balance. "This is just the beginning," he murmured. The collapse was undeniable, but so was the fire to rebuild. In the silent darkness, a new resolve was forged, stronger, deeper, unbreakable. The air in the boardroom was electric, thick with anticipation and barely concealed animosity. Every eye was fixed on her, the young woman who had clawed her way through betrayal and loss to stand at this pivotal moment. The weight of her company's future rested on the looming vote, a decision that could either crown her legacy or crush her beneath its unforgiving edge. Her voice cut through the murmurs. "This company is not just numbers and contracts. It's a promise to everyone who believed in us." Silence fell, heavy and expectant. Around the polished table, old alliances fractured and new ones formed, each executive grappling with loyalty, regret, and ambition. The summit had arrived. The moment when power, hope, and destiny collided. Hours bled into silence as votes were cast one by one. Each ballot a dagger to fragile trust, each whisper a fracture in alliances once thought unbreakable. The final tally echoed like a thunderclap, an outcome that shattered the room's fragile calm. Some faces flushed with victory, others wore the hollow mask of defeat. Amidst the storm of whispered accusations and regretful glances, she found herself alone near the vast window, the city sprawling below like a silent witness to the battle. "I did what I had to," she breathed, voice raw with exhaustion and resolve. This was her crucible, the peak where everything she'd fought for was tested and transformed forever. The cost of power was clearer than ever. It demanded sacrifices that scarred the soul. Far from the glittering towers, in a quiet hospital room bathed in soft lamplight, the boy, now a young teenager, clasped his father's frail hand. Time was a thief, stealing strength and moments too precious to lose. Yet, in the stillness, love burned fiercely. The boy's silent vow echoed louder than words. He would carry the legacy forward, not just as a businessman, but as a son who understood the true cost of ambition. "I'm proud of you," the father whispered, voice trembling with pain and pride. The boy squeezed back, eyes brimming with tears, the bond between them a fragile lifeline amid the gathering shadows. Outside the window, the city pulsed on, indifferent to this intimate reckoning of love, loss, and hope. Back in the corporate world, the woman, battle-scarred but unyielding, found an unexpected moment of peace. Seated across from the child who had grown alongside her trials, their eyes locked in a conversation deeper than words. "You're the boss of my heart," she murmured, voice thick with vulnerability and strength. The empire had faltered, but this bond was her true legacy, unyielding, tender, and real. In that quiet room, amidst the hum of a city that never truly slept, they shared a promise that love could outlast any fall, that power without heart was hollow. This embrace was the summit's true meaning, a triumph of the soul over ambition's harsh demands. As dawn broke over the city, the remnants of the empire smoldered, ashes of power and pride drifting into the pale morning light. On a rooftop overlooking the waking streets, the woman and the child stood side by side, silhouettes against soft pastel skies. Loss hung heavy in the air, but so did the fragile promise of renewal. "This is not the end," she whispered, breath mingling with the crisp air. Scars from battles past marked their journey, but their hearts beat steady and entwined. Together, they faced the uncertain horizon, not as victims, but as survivors ready to rebuild. The story of power and love was far from over. It was only just beginning. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the cafe's large windows, casting golden patterns over the worn wooden table where she sat alone. Her fingers traced the edges of a leather-bound journal, pages filled with sketches, plans, and words that told a story of sacrifice and relentless determination. The empire she once sought to conquer had crumbled, but in its ashes lay a profound revelation. Power, she realized, was fleeting and hollow if unaccompanied by resilience and heart. Sipping her now cold coffee, she whispered to herself, "What remains when the titles fall away? What is left when you strip down to the person beneath?" In this quiet moment, amidst the hum of strangers and clinking cups, she faced the raw truth. Her greatest victory would not be in wealth or status, but in the unbreakable strength forged by pain and perseverance. Under a canopy of autumn trees shedding their amber leaves, the boy, now a young man, sat on a weathered park bench, cradling his notebook like a treasure. Each page bore the marks of a life lived with quiet courage, sketches of ideas, business plans, and dreams that had once seemed impossibly distant. The illness that shadowed his every step was no longer a sentence but a challenge he met with steady resolve. He watched as leaves danced in the crisp breeze, feeling the bittersweet passage of time. "I am not defined by what I lost," he thought, eyes gleaming with determination. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but every scar was a badge of honor. Here, in the stillness of nature's embrace, he embraced the fierce hope that had carried him this far, proof that even fragile lives could shape powerful futures. In a modest, sunlit office, filled with the hum of quiet activity, the woman gathered with a small but fiercely loyal team. Gone were the grand boardrooms and polished facades. Here, raw passion and shared purpose thrived. Whiteboards were scrawled with new ideas, laptops hummed with fresh energy, and the air crackled with possibility. Though the scars of betrayal lingered, so did an unyielding commitment to rebuild, not just a company, but a legacy anchored in authenticity, transparency, and heart. "We begin here," she said, voice steady and inspiring, "with trust and vision, no matter how small the start." Faces lit up with cautious optimism. In this humble room, they planted seeds of hope, ready to nurture a future where power would be wielded with compassion, and success measured by more than profit margins. The young man stood proudly outside his first real business, a modest but bustling neighborhood storefront. The late afternoon sun bathed the scene in golden light, casting long shadows that spoke of hard-won progress. Beside him, his mother's face glistened with tears, tears of joy, relief, and quiet pride. Years of struggle and sacrifice etched into every line of her face had finally yielded this moment of triumph. "You've come so far," she whispered, voice trembling. He smiled, knowing the road ahead was long and uncertain, but this victory was a testament to resilience. The illness, the setbacks, the losses, all had shaped him but never defined him. Standing there, he embraced the future with open arms, fueled by the lessons of the past and the unbreakable spirit that carried him forward. At a lively community event, under tents fluttering in a gentle breeze and the murmur of hopeful conversations, the woman and the young man's paths crossed unexpectedly. Their shared glance held the weight of intertwined journeys, pain, ambition, loss, and resilience. No longer bound by the shadows of past empires or illness, they recognized in each other a kindred spirit. This was no story of conquest, but of rebirth. Together, they envisioned a future where strength was tempered by kindness and power, balanced with compassion. The crowd around them faded, leaving only the quiet, powerful connection of two souls ready to build anew. Their eyes spoke of healing, hope, and the quiet triumph of those who had lost much but gained everything that truly mattered. The gentle hum of the city faded behind the garden's serene embrace, where sunlight filtered through lush leaves, casting dappled shadows on weathered stone benches. The woman sat quietly, her gaze soft but reflective, tracing the delicate petals of blooming flowers. The long and arduous journey she had endured, the betrayals, the heartache, the near collapse of everything she once held dear, felt less like a weight now, and more like a tapestry woven with threads of resilience and hard-earned wisdom. Strength, she thought, is not just about holding power or winning battles. It's about having the grace to rise again, no matter how many times you fall. Around her, life blossomed in fragile beauty, and in that quiet moment, she understood that true legacy is not built from empires, but from the hearts and souls touched along the way. Across the city, beneath the amber glow of autumn leaves, the young man found solace on a quiet park bench. His journey had been fraught with invisible battles, the lingering effects of illness, the quiet fears he kept locked away, and the heavy weight of expectations he carried silently. Yet as children's laughter echoed through the crisp air and golden leaves drifted to the ground, he felt a new lightness stirring within. The scars of his past no longer defined him. They were the foundation of a deeper strength. Our struggles don't shape us, they refine us, he thought, tracing the edges of his open notebook filled with sketches and dreams. The path ahead remained uncertain, but in that golden moment, hope was no longer a distant dream. It was the pulse of his every step forward. In a vibrant, bustling community workspace filled with chatter, laughter, and clattering keyboards, the woman and young man stood side by side, their partnership a beacon of renewal. Gone were the days when ambition was a solitary climb. Now they built together, fueled by shared vision and a commitment to uplift others. Chalkboards bore colorful plans and inspirational quotes, while diverse voices collaborated enthusiastically. Leadership isn't about control, she said, eyes shining with conviction. It's about service, connection, and creating space for everyone to rise. Around them, hope blossomed, not in grand gestures or hollow promises, but in the small, meaningful steps taken daily. Together, they rewrote what it meant to lead, with heart, humility, and unbreakable resolve. On a rooftop overlooking the city bathed in the warm hues of sunset, the woman and young man stood shoulder to shoulder. The skyline stretched endlessly before them, a canvas painted with the glow of fading light and the promise of tomorrow. This rooftop, once a place of isolation and despair, had transformed into a sanctuary of hope. "We have lost much," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "But what we have gained is far greater: understanding, compassion, and the courage to begin anew." He nodded in silent agreement, the shared vow between them unspoken but deeply felt. Together, they embraced the uncertain future, not as fractured individuals, but as united forces ready to face whatever came next with open hearts and steady hands. A sunlit city park alive with the sounds of life, children's laughter, soft conversations, the rustling of leaves. The woman and young man walked side by side down a tree-lined path, their steps unhurried, their spirits lighter than before. The scars of the past remained, but now they were tempered by acceptance, growth, and hope. "We are more than what we've lost," she said, voice steady and warm. "We are the stories we choose to tell, the love we share, and the lives we touch." Their smiles met, in a quiet moment of understanding, a shared promise that no matter the falls endured, the human spirit rises stronger, forever the true boss of its own heart. As they fade into the vibrant crowd, the city hums a new song, one of resilience, redemption, and unending possibility.